my dad came to me and he said just one thing: until you are 25, do not optimize for money, optimize for failures. No, not even lessons or wins. Optimize for failures. You have to fail as many times as possible until you're 25.
Welcome to The Mountain Pass, a podcast about lifelong learning, curiosity, and our wonderful brain. Topics we love at Alp Audio. But this isn't a podcast about Alp, the product. Rather, it's conversations driven by our curiosity. We are all lifelong learners, and I wanted to interview Mohit exactly because of this. Mohit has been building different products and teams for the past few years in completely different spaces, from apps, crypto, to Mailman, what he's working on today. We definitely went down the learning rabbit hole in this one and how learning new concepts can change your worldview on just about everything. Let's dive in. Mohit, thank you so much for coming on the Mountain Pass. I wanted to dive
you so
straight. Oh, my pleasure. I wanted to dive straight into, your LinkedIn profile says you are a serial maker. So why don't we just start with that? Tell us about that. What have you been making over the past few years? I know one of your products, but not all of them. So I think that's a great starting point to introduce you.
Okay, fantastic. This phrase serial maker actually has a little bit of history. I did not know who I am until the last year, 2020. I thought I'm a founder. I thought I am an engineer. But then 2020 was the year when I had time to sit down. I just exited from my previous company, so I had time to sit down to think about who I am really, and then to build something that complements my style. Then I realized, hey, ever since from childhood, there's been one constant thing, which is making. Whenever there's an opportunity to make something, I immediately get so excited that I do not care about anything else. And If I go back into my childhood when I was 7, 8, when I used to watch cartoons, in those days I used to make new episodes of cartoons. I mean, I would take my favorite cartoon characters and make new episode, mix and match up, and these are just for me myself. And then I grew a little bit older, when all of my neighborhood kids in my neighborhood and all of my friends, they were getting new toys. We were not really too well off. We definitely had food on our plates, but we were not too well off that we could afford all the fancy stuff. So when you could not buy something, you tend to make a makeshift version of that thing. So if somebody had a toy car, you would probably take a plank and put 4 bearing wheels on it and try to ride it as a car. So that had an entirely different uh, enjoyment and fun to me. I realized, and slowly over next few years, making became my default choice whenever I had to choose between making and buying. And I constantly started observing that in everything that I did, be it the products that I do, be it some things that I want to buy, and those things are expensive. I know I could find around things that I could assemble together and make a makeshift version of it, just to experience the just to have that experience of owning something that does something like that. So that's why I realized in last year that if nothing else, if I'm stripped of everything that I have, ultimately what will remain is a maker. And that's why I call myself a serial maker. I mean, I gave some glimpses of the things that I've made, but professionally in career, in 2013 I started making products. Before that I was just making apps and websites for individual organizations or individual people, small teams. When I was in college, that was my first business, which gave me some little extra pocket money. But after that, I just started making products. So I realized there were multiple projects that came in, which were kind of similar. So similar project management systems, similar invoicing tools, where some features were requested by 3-4 people. So I started making them as independent products. And that's when I learned about SaaS, subscription billing, recurring revenue, MRR, ARR, all of this thing. I built those and I failed many, many times. I mean, I knew how to build it. That's what I was learning. And I did not know what to do after building something. That that one thing, what to do after building something, took me 4 or 5 years to finally learn, which is distribution. All I thought was, if you make something that people want, they'll find you and they'll come to you. But then I realized, boss, for them to find you, you have to be present in as much as in as many places as possible, so that they can find you if they start looking out for you. So this was one thing gap, because everybody says make something that people want. I mean, making is fine, but how do you make this thing reach to the people who want it? This distribution is something that took me really long time to learn, and uh, 3 products for me to learn. I failed these 3 4 times. I learned finally distribution. Then finally I started understanding what to make, how to distribute, how to get that initial traction, and how to build on top of it. So yeah, uh, some notable products that I built were Gorilla. So Gorilla was an invoicing cloud invoicing app for Indian small businesses. I mean, I don't remember exactly, but I think we were the first one to be on cloud. Um, the alternatives were local. Your accountant would use it. You would send emails, Excel sheets, and this and that. So this was a very simple accounting app. We had 300 some we had 300 something paying customers in the first year, and that number sounds so small that I immediately shut it down. I mean, those were the days. This is 2013, 14, when Facebook was raising millions of dollars, and there were some companies in India, like Flipkart, who was raising tens of millions of dollars, and they had tens of millions of users. Compared to that, 300 users as a startup in first 15 months sounded like we had nothing. So, which in hindsight is wrong. I mean, 300 paying customers for a SaaS business in first 15 months is great, and a sustainable business could be made out of it. But I was having wrong benchmarks, so I gave up on it too soon. I shut it down. I built something else. The next notable thing that I did for multiple years is a product called Horntel. It was a notification system for Android developers. I mean, those were the days when notifications were not actionable. You could not control too many notifications. As a developer, all you would get is ability to send one line, one word description, and a link that would open when you click on the notification. But we made a system for Android developers where Android developers could send actionable notifications. They could do as much as accepting the entire payment, credit card, into the notification within the notification itself. That had uh, good acceptance within the Android developer communities, businesses who had their main business as Android apps. And in India, those were the days where when iOS was not very prevalent. Android was the number one operating system that people would choose, and which was also affordable in those days. So we got multiple businesses using our system until I think it was Android N or Android O. I think it was Android N, when Android N came out with notification system which were actionable. So slowly over the next 12 months, our users started churning out because they were getting native systems, very similar, free of cost, and supported by almost all the new Android phones. So this was something that slowly we started going downhill since that Android version launched. So eventually eventually one of our investors itself bought out the technology to use in their product. So that's how I exited this particular company, and it was a reasonable financial outcome for most of the stakeholders who were involved in this particular project. After this, I took some time because then I didn't know what to make. I mean, I had many ideas. I always have many ideas, but this time I learned something new, which was the product was good, people wanted it, but something totally out of the blue killed it. In a sense, I'm sure we could have survived somehow, but as they say, what if Google builds this? I mean, this is a feature, not a product. So those were the lessons that I learned from that one particular, I would, oh, failure slash minor success.
That
Um,
that answer
so I,
is so common. If Google can
yep.
build it, it's a feature, it's not a product.
Yes, I mean, I heard this question from many people, many customers before, and all I said was, if Google could build it, they would have built it. I mean, I think some things, I was in denial that Google wouldn't build it, because for many versions notifications sucked. But ultimately, I think it's just about priorities. When notifications and screens, where watch screens, I mean very tiny screens, where the best kind of user interface is a notification. When those started become popular, I think notifications became relevant in their roadmap, and maybe that's why they were late, but then they eventually came out. Now notifications, XML notifications are everywhere. I mean, that is the default kind of notifications that you expect. Notification to be more contextual, to have as much information as possible. And if you want to reply or do something in a notification, at least some basic actions are there in the notifications now. Yeah, so those were two major notable things that I did. Then there was a gap where I did not make anything, but I was just investing in other startups, and crypto startups, mostly crypto startups. And I did this small fund called Authority Capital. So this was a time where I was taking some time to not immediately jump into building the next stuff, but also to learn and understand the various other industries and the world. Uh, I did it for 3 years. That was fantastic. I mean, uh, when I jumped into crypto in 2016, 17, it was it was an entirely different realm. I mean, it just this ideology questioned my assumptions about the world so much that it kind of changed whole of me. I don't think I am the same person who believes in something now. The one big thing that it taught me was first principles. I mean, I think all of us believe that we think from first principles, but first principles have different levels. I mean, this crypto ideology and spending time within crypto communities taught me about how to question something that you have assumed, that you have been taught that this is true for your entire life. That is Now that gave me entirely different perspective on things, not just within crypto but outside crypto, in the outer world, where I realized, so this ideology led me to question myself, who am I, which led to the answer, if nothing else, if somebody takes everything away from me and leave me with nothing, then in the end I'm just a maker. So yeah, that's kind of the story.
That was a great answer. There's a lot I actually want to unpack, but first off, when you say you learned things from first principles then that changed how you look at everything in the crypto world specifically, what are you talking about?
Okay, uh, I don't know how deep do you want to go, but
The deeper the better is our general theme in the
okay.
Mountain Pass.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so as a kid, I don't know if you have ever questioned, but there were some metal coins, and I used to believe, and this is, trust me, not making this up, but when I think back that this was my question in those days, I kind of am astonished myself. So I used to ask, or I used to tell, I actually assumed that if I have uh, um, a 50-cent coin, so the metal used in this coin is worth 50 cents. That's how some coins are thick, some coins are thin, some coins are heavy, some coins are light, some coins are made of different metals. So this was I how I understood coins. Okay, and even in the currency notes, I don't know in other countries, but in India there used to be a metal strip that goes across that goes vertically across the currency note. And I was think that this metal strip is maybe of more expensive material. That's why this currency note has value, because this metal has value, this metal is of worth this thing. So this was my thought, my assumption. Fast forward 2016, I was reading this book called Sapiens. And in Sapiens, what blew my mind was this assumption. that something that is within the currency note or within the currency coin is valuable. That's why that coin is valuable. This question, this blew my mind. I realized the metal used was worth pennies, but the value was more than that. Why is the difference between the value of the metal used versus the value of the coin itself? I mean, just because a metal which is very inexpensive metal is shaped something like this in a particular shape, it has some other value. I mean, that realization blew me, and I went on the quest to find answers. Answer to why does this particular shape of an inexpensive metal has higher value. One second. And from there, I realized something called the power of stories, power of narratives, power of trust, power of belief, power of faith. I realized almost everything that we look around us is a story. So, for example, I can give you some examples if you have time. So, let me know or stop me whenever you want me to
No,
stop.
go for it. I mean, I
Okay.
completely
So,
connect to the story you're saying, because when I first explained crypto or Bitcoin to my
mhm,
parents, my father comes from a background of cryptography, so he gets that aspect to it. But then trying to explain to my mother about
mhm,
ascribing value just because there's a shared belief, just because there's a shared story
mhm,
and nothing tangible,
mhm,
and then kind of
mhm.
showing her how that's exactly how a paper bill gets value, or a metal coin, just like you were describing, gets value. And it's
Yes.
it's like in the Matrix with the red pill and the blue pill. All of a sudden, when you embrace
Yep.
it, it really does change how you look at things. So definitely keep on with the examples.
Absolutely. Okay. So fantastic. So this is fantastic direction that we are taking. Uh, so some stories. I'll give you a very simple thing. I mean, let's forget about money and everything. We have so many corporations, companies, Google, Facebook, all across the world, and there's some value that we assign to it through the value of their stocks. And all until now, all until now, we have tried to figure out some mathematical formula based on their manufacturing. Based on their head count, based on their production value, based on so many different mathematical numerical formulas, so that we could find a market capitalization for a particular corporation. But if you think of it, what is a corporation? And I mean, is corporation the building in which everybody goes and work? Will corporation cease to exist if they change the building? Or is corporation the people? I mean, are people not replaceable? Can you replace the people? Is corporation something else? So what is a corporation? At the end of the day, corporation is just one identity that is written in some database, registrar of companies. Uh, Once that entry is made, the corporation exists with or without people, with or without land, with or without resources, assets, with or without production, with or without anything. So that value in that register, in that database, somehow gets value because of everything that happens around it. And it's very easy to kill a corporation. You just remove the database, or you just liquidate the corporation, which means you just make that entry almost nullable. So this is the story of corporation. But what is corporation? I mean, how do people get together? How do people make something? How do these people make something that other people use? Now here is the power of story narrative, finding something that is missing, building a story around it. I mean, same product made by two different corporations can have two different outcomes. uh, and these two different outcomes ultimately are based on two different narratives that these two companies chose for their very similar products. And this realization kind of made me think, when everything is so subjective, uh, why do we try to find value of a company through some very objective factors? That doesn't sound right to me. And then a few things that I observed later on kind of kind of confirmed what I was thinking. I'll give you an example. I mean, Tesla immediately blew up. I mean, none of this is financial advice. I mean, you can put in those disclaimers. I'm just sharing some observations. Tesla,
I wasn't expecting
with
to put a disclaimer before we recorded, but
okay,
I'll add it in.
okay, okay. Yep. I mean, if you look at so Tesla, some people say with similar production quality, with similar production, why is the value jumping up so high? I mean, if you think about it, Tesla is Tesla. I mean, one of the big factors of Tesla is Elon Musk. And while Elon Musk has multiple companies, you cannot invest or participate in any of the other companies as a retail investor, as an individual. I mean, if you have some, but for 98% of the people, the only way to bet on Elon Musk is to invest in Tesla. The only way. You cannot invest in Elon Musk in any other way. So when Elon Musk makes an American astronaut go to International Space Station from American soil in an American rocket, a lot of Americans would want to invest in Elon Musk. Somebody who did that after many years. But how do you invest, or how do you make a bet on this one individual? There is no other way. The only way is through one of his companies, which is public. None of his other companies are public. So again, I'm not saying that is the sole reason, but I'm saying these are the kind of narratives which go in somebody who wants to make a bet. I mean, these are the kind of narratives which no mathematical formula can capture. And a lot of very purist traders or investors would would complain about this one particular phenomena, that hey, you should value a company in on these particular parameters. But again, a new thing that I learned was you cannot tell how the world should behave or what the world should believe in. I mean, you can put forward your version of truth, and then it's up to the world to believe it or not. If you say a value of the company should be believed on these three parameters, maybe the purists will agree. But then there are so many irrational people who do not really care about all of these things. They just see one thing and they make the bets in just based on this one factor in their one. So ultimately, to make any decision, you have to convince just yourself, nobody else. And when you have convinced yourself, hey, I just want to make a bet on Elon Musk through this one company, then you're making a bet on Elon Musk through this one company, no matter what the other purists say. So these are the things that I realized: power of stories, power of narratives. And similar thing happens with your currency. I mean, you value $1 at $1. I mean, this particular paper at $1, uh, because government says so. Because your government says so. There's absolutely no other reason. This, I mean, so now we are going one level deeper. Purists say this company is worth $220 million, for example. If I ask these purists, why do you think $250 million has the value of $250 million? How do we calculate that? Do we calculate all the paper and do we then there's no answer. I mean, just going one level deep. So these are the kind of thing. This is the kind of thinking that Sapiens taught me, to understand that at the bottom of everything, at the bottom of every country, at the bottom of every religion, at the bottom of every corporation, at the bottom of every currency, there is a narrative, is a story, and that is it. When people start to believe, when more and more people start to believe in these stories, the value of something goes up. When more and more people stop believing in these stories, the value of something goes down. That is the ultimate first principle. I mean, there's nothing else. And this applies to anything and everything. This applies to land. For example, a piece of land can have different values for different people. If you plan to use this particular piece of land, say for setting up a factory, it will have a different value to you, versus if you plan to use this particular piece of land to set up your home. Uh, and the third version, a particular land that was owned by your ancestors will have entirely different value to you than anybody else in the world. And none of this can be captured by mathematical formulas or any formula or any justification. The only justification is what you give or I give in my head to myself. So it's about what stories are people telling to themselves. We do not need stories to tell to anybody. Ultimately, we just tell stories to ourselves just to justify our actions. So the world is only about not corporations, products, anything. The world is only about stories that we tell people. We give as an option to the world that they can tell to themselves to believe or give value to something.
Amazing. So I want to take a pause for a second
Mm-hmm.
and kind of zoom in on this whole aspect, because maybe someone who is listening now was going through the same journey that you had gone through when you were learning this on your own. Um, and that's because a lot of these concepts aren't intuitive for people who grow up in,
Mm-hmm.
I'll speak for myself, in a Western society where there are a lot of things that you take for granted, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that a dollar is worth a dollar. Land in New York is always going to be valuable. All
Mm-hmm.
kinds of things like that, and you never really question those beliefs. And then when you start going down this journey of learning, sometimes sometimes you need someone to show you the way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need someone to answer the questions that pop up in your mind. Learning has a lot of different levels, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's just acquiring the knowledge and hearing a theory. And the question is, where do you even hear that? And then when you hear it, you immediately react to it. You agree, you disagree, you have questions that pop up that you want to ask. And then there's, who do you ask? What answers
Mm-hmm.
do they give? So there's this entire learning journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to dive into that experience for you also on this whole topic, because I think this is just as much an emotional journey as it is a knowledge cognitive one. Being able
Mm-hmm.
to embrace a new worldview, in my mind, deals much more with emotion and admitting that you've been looking at things the wrong way than it actually does with plain being convinced of a new theory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also, I think this connects to what you were talking about before in terms of how you made your way to being, that serial maker, and realizing that you were building all of these products, but if you build it, no one will come, and you need to work on distribution. And
Yep.
that also is a shift in your mindset. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, wow, wait a second, I need to be focusing on distribution. I need to be thinking about marketing my product before I even build it. What does that even look? And so, what's
Mm-hmm.
your learning journey look like? I mean, it can be about one of those, both of those, maybe what was different, maybe what was the same. But how did you learn about each one of those? What were those stages?
Got it. Okay. Uh, Over period, I've realized the method that works for me for learning is by failing. I mean, and it was a long journey. This is the conclusion that I've realized. And what? So here's how I did it. When I was young, I had very low stakes to fail, so I could fail multiple times. Uh, and the best thing was when I was 21, my dad came to me. I just passed out of my college, and everybody was trying to get a job and everything. My dad came to me and he said just one thing: until you are 25, do not optimize for money, optimize for failures. No, not even lessons or wins. Optimize for failures. You have to fail as many times as possible until you're 25. Nobody cares if you have won or not, if you have made $1 million. But if you have failed enough, you will have so much exposure. You would have so much learning that nobody at the age of 26 would have. So you have to fail multiple times in different ways. That's all I care about. That gave me the uh, confidence to fail. I mean, to take a plunge is easier when you know that failure is an accepted outcome, not just by you but people that you look up to. Uh, so I think that one conversation with my dad was one of the life changing conversations that I had with anybody. That gave me confidence to, hey, I do not have to win. I just have to try and ultimately fail. So as long as I fail, and as soon as I fail, I can fail as many times. So optimizing for failure when your stakes are low is one of the best things that you can do. I also call it failing in the shadows. Everybody I'm again talking of building products where you have no distribution. So nobody knows what you're doing, but you're doing something in the shadows and you're just failing. You're just failing. But when you fail enough number of times, you become master of at least one thing. For example, say after a year, after 2 years, you become master of building products. Then you have to fail at next thing. Next thing that you have to fail at is distribution. Again, you fail at it for 2 years. You fail it by doing different. So this time you have built something that can sustain you for another 2 years of failing in a new manner. So you build something, and this time you just fail at distribution. This time you try podcasts, you try blogs, you try running advertisements, you try sponsoring something, you try to buy billboards, you try and do everything just to fail in distribution. Once your product is ready, after 4 years you would have learned product, you would have learned distribution, if not learned, but at least you would know various things that you can do in both these areas. In the fifth year, now anybody who would be listening, they would question, hey, I do not have 4 years or 5 years. I'll come to it. I'll come to it. How to optimize for failures even further. But this is how you do when your stakes are very low, when nobody knows you, when you're in the shadows. You just try and fail as many times as possible. This is what I did. This is what worked for me. But in the fifth year, you would have so many lessons that nobody else would have, who is just planning for 4 years to be perfect at product, be perfect at distribution in the first go. So somebody is planning and learning and learning and learning through books, theoretical learning, but they nobody would have your experience at failing in the fifth year that you have in fifth year. So this is what you do when you have lower stakes. But suppose you do not have such low stakes. Suppose you have some responsibilities that you need to take care. In that case, I would fail at learning by doing thought experiments. How I would do it is very simple. I would learn from somebody else's failures. I would think of something I plan to do. It could be as simple as making a table. I would just think in my mind, hey, something like this would work, something like this would work. And then I will go on YouTube and look at people making tables. So the point is this: I do not go on YouTube, learn how to make table, and then think in my head. I first think in my head, then go onto YouTube, and then see how close was I. And this applies to anything and everything. If, for example, if I had to start running social media advertisement for my company Mailman, I would not learn how these other inbox companies or how other productivity companies are trying to do it. First, I'll do it on my own, because when you first see other people doing it, you log yourself in one particular direction instead of exploring all the directions. And some people would say one direction is better than no direction. It is, but not initially. Initially, it is better to explore all the directions. And even if so, and not again, not with high stakes. So if again, now with Mailman, if I have high stakes, there's a growing company, I cannot afford to fail at a bigger scale with Mailman. So I would run advertisements only for say $1,000, but I would spread these $1,000 across 10 different kind of advertisements. Then I'll take my lessons, I'll take my learnings, then I'll go and study how to do these ads, and then I'll see where how close was I, how close or how far I was. So this is this is my current method of learning, which is to do a thought experiment. So if I can afford to do a small scale experiment, then I do a small space scale experiment, which is like $500, $1,000. This is small scale experiment, and which takes less than 2 weeks. $1,000, less than 2 weeks, I do a small scale experiment, and not just one, multiple experiments. I take all of my learnings. If I cannot afford to do it, then I do a thought experiment. I do a thought experiment, and then I go to the learning resources to really see how far I was from the direction that other people took. That's where I correct my course. I do multiple rounds of these with multiple books, multiple learning resources, multiple podcasts, multiple YouTube videos, YouTube channels. Ultimately, I accelerate the same process of 5 years. I finish the same process within 4 or 5 months. So this is my current way of doing it. This is what has worked for me. This is process that I've not learned from any other book or any other person. This is a process that worked for me, just me. Uh, and I think it worked for me because I started doing it when the stakes were low. So I think not being being an unknown person in a noisy world has also its merits. So yeah, that's how I optimize my learning. And these days my learning resources are only two, either audiobooks or podcasts. I mean, I don't somehow I do not have attention to sit and read for multiple hours now, which I used to have at one point in time. uh, and I'm so distracted by screens. So whenever I'm doing some house chores or doing taking a walk or working out, I just put on an audiobook on or a podcast in my ears, just to simultaneously grasp everything. Yeah. So this is my a macro level procedure of learning, and this is what I tactically do to learn.
So, first off, I think your dad's advice is just pure gold. And it's
Thanks.
wonderful to hear that advice. I was blown away by that. I think that's really timeless. That's also, I think, one of the things that the thing that I'm going to be taking away from our conversation. It's
Mhm.
such a great piece of advice for young people. Second of all, I just wanted to ask what you meant when you said that you think there's an advantage of being a non-noisy person in a noisy world.
So yeah, so advantage of being an unknown in a noisy world. So uh, you can actually, when you are not known and everybody is trying to like attract attention towards themselves, think of it like as a playground where you can just do anything and everything. You can fail as many times as possible as you want, and nobody will notice, nobody will even care. And that sometimes give anxiety, but many times it gives that sense of relief that, hey, okay, actually I failed, I did something, I tried, I failed. The important thing is that it gives you that playground to try. When everybody is looking up to you, that trying becomes difficult, because when everybody has high expectations of you, that trying becomes that trying takes time and planning, which means you think of something. But so when you are unknown, the difference between you thinking of something and doing something is very less. It's like almost instantaneously. But when you are known, thinking of doing something and doing something, there is a distance. And that is with planning, because repercussions will be can be massive. So that's what I meant. There is a merit to being unknown in a noisy world, because that gives you playground to try and fail. If you win, that's a bonus, but just optimize for failures.
Got it. Got it. So what I was hearing was a lot of learning by doing. Also, the failures are failures of experiments that you're running, that you're working on. But there was also an aspect of learning by listening, mainly listening,
Mm-hmm.
but learning from other people's failures.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious, when do you find the time for your learning? Where does it fit into your daily habits or your daily schedule?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes.
And second, do you find that you miss kind of the more, I'll call it the academic side, but more of the general frameworks about things?
So I'll take these questions one at a time. So how do I find time? I mean, beautiful question. This had been my struggle a few years back, where I was doing so many things, I just could not find time to read books. So there was a time when I was reading one book a week, and I was just going through books. And when I read book, I make two things very sure. uh, unless it's a fiction, I do not engross too much into a book. I try to just get gist of it and move on. If I do not enjoy a book after a certain point, I just drop the book. Completing the book is not something which is really important to me. I just try to get the sense of the book. So I was going through many books, but then a few years ago, I was just indulging too many things, not physically but mentally. In my head, I was doing too many things that I could not find attention to sit and read one book or focus on one book. uh, so what worked for me was listening to audio. And listening to audio is so beautiful that you can do even while doing something else. So if you are commuting, you can play an audiobook. If you are doing your dishes, you can play a podcast. If you're taking a walk, working out, instead of music in my earphones, I started playing audiobooks or podcasts. I limited my music listening only when I was working. So when I'm working, I'll play music, which helps me focus. Other than that, there was no point when music would be playing in my ears. So yeah, so this is how I found time. Anytime I was I found myself opening up Spotify and listening to music, I changed it and started opening Audible or my podcasts app. uh, what is the second question?
The second one was about general frameworks. So kind of marrying the hands-on practical knowledge that you're getting from failing and from running tests and from actually doing to the broader
Mhm.
picture. Maybe it's more
Got it.
academic. I don't necessarily think about it that way.
Yeah. Okay. um okay, so I'm just thinking about it. I have never thought about it. I do enjoy going through frameworks that other people have come up with, but somehow I'm not able to recall a framework that has word to word worked for me. Uh, uh, I think I, I don't think I've paid enough attention or a lot of attention to other people frameworks, as in to adopt them in my life. Some things, a few things I did have, like making sure to uh, walk a little bit, irrespective of your workout or your work schedule. These are the things that I have definitely picked up from other people, but I don't think I have picked up any framework of about thinking from somebody as it is. The only framework that I have thinking and I'm still learning is to try to think from first principles as much as possible. I still think there is a lot of progress to be made in my thinking, and yeah. So that would be it. And how I measure my thought process is I listen to some interviews, 2 hour long interviews on Tim Ferriss podcast or Joe Rogan podcast, where he's interviewing the best people in the world, best performance of the world. So whenever he asks question to them, I pose it and I try to answer it myself. So if I know enough about the subject, I try to just answer it, or what could be a good answer. And I just play the same thing. First, I think in my head a thought experiment, then I play the original answer, and then I see what kind of direction the other person took, who is really involved in that thing. So this is one exercise that I often do. Uh, yeah, but I don't think I do anything else apart from this when it comes to frameworks.
Got it. We're busy working on audio learning that's also hands-on. So when we figure out how to marry audio that you're doing passively with also hands-on, I'll let
Hmm.
you know, because I think we'll have something powerful when we figure that out and out.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
just to kind of wrap up, what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I mean, mix some more stuff. I mean, side projects. There are always three different side projects. Uh, or when I'm absolutely not in mood of uh, sitting on my desk, sitting in my chair, I would lie on my couch and watch some movie or something. I mean, I nowadays movies has gone down, but before lockdowns, before COVID, I used to watch at least one movie every week in theaters. I mean, I am such a huge fan of listening to stories, and I don't think there's any movie that I have disliked. I just like all the movies. So movies is one thing that I do for fun. Other than that, I just make some silly side projects.
Any examples?
So again, these are side projects which you would not find on the internet. These are something that I keep doing for myself. So so some examples would be, I had this CCTV camera in one part of the house, and this camera would take photos every few minutes. So I was just building, for example, small image recognition. So a small tool where I would categorize all of these images. Hey, in this image there is one person. In this image there is two people. In this image, people are not wearing mask. In this image, somebody's moving, somebody's going, somebody's sleeping. Like these are kind of things, and I wanted to make an automation system so that I get a notification eventually when something similar happens. Hey, somebody is walking in, two people are coming in, three people are coming in, two people without masks are coming in, things like that, so that I get a notification. Because this CCTV camera only would send a notification something like this: hey, something is moving, which was a notification. And every time I would open the feed and I would look at the camera, but I really did not get a lot of information from the notification. So this was something that I was building, again abandoned at one point. Another thing that I was building was, this was a physical thing. I was trying to build a self-balancing motor that I could attach in my scooter. I had an old scooter, so that I could make it self-balancing. I mean, again, there is no purpose. The definition of silly side project is there should be not a huge purpose behind doing something. You do it just because to find out can you do it. So yeah, these are two examples of the recent things that I have done.
Cool. So, just before we wrap up, and I know we're kind of towards the end of our time, but I wanted to know how you went
Mhm.
from the serial making to Mailman, which is what you're working on now, which for everyone listening is, I think about it, I use it. It's the way to control and safeguard your time. And basically, it's a big pause button on your email, and imagine it as a mailman who delivers your email whenever you want throughout the day. That can be once, it can be twice, it can be every hour on the hour, and it just helps you control your workflow. So, how did you get from serial making, thinking about what you want to do, in the beginning of 2020 to mailman?
First of all, beautiful definition how you described mailman. Okay, so the story of mailman is again very funny. I mean, I was doing these crypto investments, and then I stopped doing it, these startup investments, because I was just too frustrated just talking and thinking about numbers. I was not satisfied. So I wanted to start building a company again. And this is 3 years of just doing investments and talking just about money and numbers. So I wrote this small script, again, one of the silly side projects. I wrote this small script that would pause my inbox and would deliver all the incoming emails in batches every 4 hours. This was the script that I used to get some focused time to do research and find out what I want to do next, what I want to build next. And I was doing this research for multiple months. That's when Andrew Wilkinson, my partner, he runs Tiny Capital. He tweeted out that he is looking to achieve something like this with his Gmail inbox. I sent him an email with a Loom video, how to achieve this script and how to do this. He replied, "What do you think? Can this be a business?" So this small script that I was using to find focus time to find the business ideas became the business idea itself. And Andrew and I chatted a little bit about, hey, what could this product look like? And we shook our hands, we made a deal, and we started working on this as a business. So yeah, it was one of the silly side projects, which eventually found one more person who kind of needed something very similar. And from there, two of us started building this thing. We started marketing this thing, and Mailman came into existence.
Love it. So, how can people find you?
The best way to reach out to me is on my Twitter. I'm very active there and is the only social media that I use. I am at Mohit Mamoria, my first name and last name, Mohit Mamoria on Twitter. Uh, if more, just DM me. My DMs are open, and very often I'll ask you to drop me an email then. Uh, or if you directly want to email something to me, then I am very active on my emails as well. My email is mohit@mailmanhq.com, mailmanhq.com. The only caveat is that I have mailman on my inbox, so it usually takes me 24 to 48 hours to respond to new people.
Great use case. Great use case. Well, Mohit, thank you so
Yep.
much for taking the time and sharing your learning story, learning about the world from new eyes. This has been fantastic.
Hey, thank you so much, Yehoshua. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation. All the best to your podcast.